Welcome to Voices of Global Freedom Radio. We are broadcasting from San Diego, California, Saturday, April 18th, 2015. This is Backpack and our co-host Yoda. We bring our patriotic, conservative audience news you can use and actionable tactics, methods, and strategies to survive and thrive in these dangerous, troubled times. We are proud to be syndicated with the popular radio networks, the Spark Radio Network, K98 Talk, Leading Edge Radio Network, and the top 5 news picks on Top Talk Radio, along with Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, and other household names. 646-652-4667. Yoda, how are you doing today?
I am great. What a great show you planned. My man, well done. I wanna send a verbal goodwill card to a girlfriend in El Paso, Texas. Her name is Betty. Betty is no spring chicken. She lives in a plush apartment thing that I call the standing cruise ship. Anyway, poor Betty night before last fell and broke her clavicle, fancy name for her collarbone. In these situations, I always feel sorry it happened, but glad it wasn't much worse. Anyway, Betty, get well soon. That's the message here. Wonderful daughter, takes the greatest care of her, as does her son-in-law. Anyway, again, Betty, all the best to you, and get well soon and start running around. Excited about the show, Backpack. I want to hear, I know the audience wants to hear. Backpack was press at the National Association of Broadcasters. It's the prestigious radio, now TV, annual meeting and expo. It was held in Las Vegas. Big show, about 100,000 visitors. Lord knows how many exhibits. So Backpack ran around when he wasn't oogling the showgirls. Backpack ran around and interviewed people and acted as press, hung out in the press room with the big press people. Well done, Backpack. Really well done.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience to be at the National Association of Broadcasters, New Media Expo, and the International Security Council and Exposition. So I took in a lot of information, got a lot of really great networking contacts, and learned a lot about what's going on in all these major areas. It's a lot of information to take in, but I had a wonderful time, and it was really well put together, excellent job for all the people, and they had over 100,000 people. So it was a huge event.
Well, congratulations for being pressed there, my man. That was quite impressive. I know you did some stand-up interviews, one in particular. Who was that with?
Well, we're going to play that here in a little bit. It was with the president of Watchful Software, Charles Chuck Foley. He is the president, and he is doing some incredible things with talking about cybersecurity, and we're going to talk more about Hillary Clinton and the private server fiasco that just happened. And he's really a stand-up guy, and it was one of the better interviews that we've all had. Voices of Global Freedom, magnifiedview.com. It was a really great stand-up interview.
I bet he'll talk about Snowden, the contract guy for the CIA in Hawaii that blew up NSA, National Security Agency, my word. And I'll bet he addressed Sony and that scandal they had with cyber attacks. As many of our audience knows, we've been in the counter-terrorist business since long before it was fashionable, back in 1974. And heading the list now of our sources of real threats is cybersecurity. It's here to stay, with people taking over our grid and enemies taking over, in addition to power, our air traffic controls. Really here to stay, Backpack, isn't it, the threat?
Yeah, it's incredible. And one of the takeoffs I got is the RAND is very active in monitoring and helping the United States in so many different areas. What the takeoff is, each cyber security threat costs around $3.3 million, I think it's an intangible. It's hard to put a dollar figure around each of these kinds of crises that we're seeing almost on a daily with J.P. Morgan, Target, we're all in these databases, and we're all sitting vulnerable.
I got a kick out of one. It was called Stuxnet, or close to that. The word went out. It hit major media that the United States, in conjunction with Israel, had Iran centrifuges running backwards. And
Wow.
it was that sophisticated that Iranians sitting there watching a control board couldn't tell it was happening.
Wow.
And darned if we and or Israel didn't do it twice.
Wow.
So you are the guy with the high-tech internet technology background. You know this stuff infinitely more than I do, but that Stuxnet was quite an accomplishment, wasn't it?
Yeah, I have a strong background in cybersecurity. I've worked for pretty good encryption companies and RSA technologies, and have a good handle on what's really going on with all these cyber threats that we're being faced with. And now we're seeing that ISIS is also taking, where they were able to hack into France, a major television studio, and they posted "I am J. Sui ISIS," and and there's been a lot about J. Sui Charlie Hebdo, which were attacked, but that was quite a feat too. That just happened recently.
Oh, ISIS, I'm told, is kicking out hundreds of thousands of tweets daily. They have their own studio in the north of Syria. I guess it does them good for propaganda value.
Yeah, and one of the things we're seeing is at least 90,000 tweets a day, and Voices of Global Freedom Magnified View has shut down some of the sites. We've gotten from Facebook, we've gotten back saying thank you, letters from Facebook saying thank you for shutting down. One in particular was called Army of Allah. We shut that down, and it was all definitely propaganda. And so there's a fine line between some of these sites are being tracked to find the bad guys, but some of them really need how much should be shut down, but they're also able to find these people through their cell phone.
Well, I am excited, and I know the audience is, to hear your stand-up interview in Las Vegas at the association meeting there, right?
Yeah, it was a great show.
Who was the guy again?
Charles Chuck Foley. He's with Watchful Software, and we're going to look to have him as a guest on in the future. He was really very dynamic speaker and very knows what he's got a 30-year IT background, and he's taken the helms of this company. He's doing a wonderful job of helping make secure, and he brings up some really valid points that in all of my IT background and where things are going, and we're going to discuss in this pre-recorded interview with him some incredible things.
Sorry, how did you find him among all those 100,000 people back there?
Well, I went around to hundreds of booths and I interviewed lots and lots of people, but I would pick up on different people and how their energies were, and he just came to me. He was one in a million, really, I got to say that, because he's so dynamic, and there are lots of really technical people, but he could speak to a high level so that without having a 20-year background in IT, you can understand without getting bogged down in the weeds, and that's what we need, those types of people that can really explain it so that we can understand it.
With great information. It's indeed Voices of Global Freedom Magnified View. Analysis and news that our listeners can use. Well done. Everybody has a concern, people at home, retired people, military people, about their cybersecurity. It really means computer security, of course. Everybody's got a concern, certainly small and large business.
Yeah, one of the guys I've traveled the United States for 4 years. I ran into a guy who he spent $16,000 in, I don't know, at least a couple of years to get his name from identity theft. And now, unfortunately, he's withdrawn from all social media. So he's canceled all his Facebook, Twitter, everything. So one of the fallouts, which is kind of sad in a way, is that he's taken his social media off grid completely. And, that's another loss from identity theft. What are your thoughts about that?
Allow me a Yoda anecdote. It's like an anecdote, only it's mine. I was lecturing a large civic group on personal security, women's security and home security and business security. And in the back of the room walked the mayor that I happen to know of the North San Diego suburb I was lecturing in. Mayor's a great guy. He's had a 20-year career with the police department, wound up a detective. So I welcomed the honorable mayor, of course, and glad he was there as part of the thing. I had just launched the identity theft protection part of my security lecture. Damned if the mayor, previous detective, wasn't a victim of identity theft.
Wow. Yeah.
I brought him up to the podium, and he took over that part of the lecture. Everybody's vulnerable to that now. The stats, as you know, Backpack, the statistics are stunning. I can't add that many zeros and commas of how many people are being, well, their lives ruined for a while.
Yeah. Well, also, I have a friend whose father died. This just happened recently. The dad died, and immediately, not only is the grieving widow, it was stolen. People are searching the obituaries and grabbing those IDs and going to town with identity thefts. So not only did she have to deal with the grieving loss of her husband, she also had to get out of this identity theft. Isn't this just? It's just disgusting.
It's stunning. It's a business today. There are actually websites where for $4 or $5 you can buy an identity and run with it, a valid identity, run with it, ordering merchandise, having it sent overseas. It happens a lot out of Estonia, out of the Philippines, and out of Russia, but that's not the end of it. You know, everybody's in the game today. Imagine you send somebody $5 on PayPal, and they send you a current active identity, and you start ordering TV sets or something to be sent to the Philippines to you. It's amazing today. You're on top of all that stuff with your stunning IT background. I can screw up a flashlight. Hell, I have. Well, we ought to hear your star interview, huh?
Yeah, one of the other things is to be careful of Nigeria. They've really, if you get any emails from people saying that they're going to wire you money, and just delete it, because it sounds great on paper. Or people in refugee camps. There's a lot of scams out there, but we're working actually on some e-zines and some webinars that we're going to put out soon about personal safety and security. One of the major things I would tell everybody is when you're signing up for any social media, don't use your real birth date. That's critical too. Just you can still have a social media presence, but don't use real data. You just change your birth date around. Things like that are huge to prevent identity theft.
Excellent point, Backpack. Also, people should never sign their credit card. There's no reason to do that when you get the card. You can be ID'd otherwise. If you sign it, then the bad guys that anyway get a hold of your credit card, steal your wallet or whatever they do, can sit around copying your signature, and they can do it real well. Well, congratulations on your hard work at the show in Las Vegas, right? Some are suspicious that you were also gambling. You might have had a drink of adult beverages and looked at showgirls. That's the word here around the office back then.
Well, I can vouch that my legs were so I was running around meeting many really amazing people and a lot of good people at all these different conferences all at the same time, and I can take away so much information and learning. And we're excited about going to future trade shows, and really there's another one, RSA, coming up next week in San Francisco, another encryption technology. So there's a lot of people that we're going to be bringing on in the future that are all in the security world, and a lot of people know that we're helping save lives and save people's identity. It's just the idea of losing your identity to some criminal is just one of the lowest things you can imagine.
Well, you did a hell of a job. It's quite an honor to be press at a press show. That's like running around the Vatican with the Bible or being a strategist at the Pentagon. So congratulations on that, Backpack.
Well, we're going to do a brief commercial break for Impact Analytics, one of our dear friends out of Florida, and we'll be playing the pre-recorded interview in just a little bit.
Impact Analytics in Florida. The CEO's name is Tim Kalin. I worked with Tim back at the Marine Barracks bombing in Beirut following the embassy bombing. Close personal friend. Tim heads up impactanalytics.com. He has something for everybody. Backpack, what's he doing now with his punching bag thing?
He's got a great website out there. Please go check out punchingbagpost.com, and it's a consortium of all the great conservative news from all around the world, and it's aggregated, and it'll actually give an audience index, and every day it's being updated all the time, and it'll show the top 10 or so articles that have the highest audience ranking, so you can see the number next to each article, and everything is about trending these days on social media. You know, what's the hot button or hot topic. So go to punchingbagpost.com and check out what's the latest trending in our conservative news.
For you bloggers out there or anybody with about 1,000 emails, Tim puts them all together, which allows him to command incredible advertising. It's on the conservative, patriotic side as we are. Then I'll fast forward the end of the month. He sends you money. It's clean as a mother queen. And take a hard look at it. Tim Kalin, Impact Analytics in Florida. Tell him that Backpack and Yoda said to give him a buzz.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be working with great people like Impact Analytics, Tim Kalin. So here we are. I'm on the floor of the International Security Conference, and we're going to play President Chuck Foley's interview live from the floor, and it'll really changes a lot of what we're hearing on mainstream. This is really a lot of the news that we're not hearing.
Go Backpack. You're the man.
Welcome to Voices of Global Freedom Radio. We are broadcasting live on the floor of National Association of Broadcasters, as well as New Media Expo. It's a special event they're having today. We're talking with Chuck Foley with Watchful Software at www.watchfulsoftware.com. How are you doing today, Chuck?
I'm doing pretty well today. Thanks, Backpack.
It's great to be on the air with you, and we're talking about cyber security. It's one of the areas that Voices of Global Freedom, magnifiedview.com is really targeting and really is interested in. We've had a lot of recent high-profile breaches, Sony, NSA, Target, Home Depot. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's a trend that you've really begun to see in the last few years. It really became into the public consciousness when it happened to the U.S. Army with WikiLeaks. And a lot of people thought, well, that happens to the government. And then it happened with the NSA and Edward Snowden, which NSA may still be government, but it's really, really, really secure government. People started to think, wow, if that can happen to the NSA, it might be able to happen to me. And with Sony, it was proven that, yeah, it can and probably will happen to you if you're a commercial enterprise, not government. This is a standard commercial American business out for profit. Yet people believe that there's a way to go make money off of cybercrime. And as a matter of fact, a recent study by Rand Corporation shows that as of last year, cybercrime was more profitable than illegal drugs. And because of that, you're going to start seeing a lot more incidences like of the NSA, Snowden, and Sony and Target. And that's one of the key things that large organizations are now very prepared for.
Okay. Yeah, so has anyone been able to quantify the cost?
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies done in the last couple of years. And as a matter of fact, there was just a study released by Ponemon Institute that shows that the average cost of a data breach is now over $3 million every time. That has tripled in the last few years. So if you think about it, 90% of organizations that were interviewed admitted that they had a data breach in the last 12 months. And with each breach costing at least I think it's 3.3 million. And some organizations have multiple. You see why this has become a really hot topic in boardrooms around the world.
Right, and some of the things that we've learned from Sony are that they had no encryption, and they're really we're cyber aware, and we have the whole thing about the movie that brought a lot more awareness that just happened recently about the movie about Korea. What are your thoughts about what Sony did wrong, and how much could Watchful software have helped them?
I don't want to say that Sony did something wrong, because I think that Sony probably embraced what they consider to be good best practices. But the problem is with the industry approach, because for the last 10 to 20 years, industries have invested billions in securing the network, hardening the perimeter, firewall after firewall, and network appliance after network appliance. The whole intent was, let's build these impenetrable walls so that the storming Mongol hordes can't crash in and steal our data. Sony probably had a very solid network perimeter. The problem is that once someone does get on the inside, maybe because they're an insider or maybe because they stole credentials, and that's what happened at Sony. There wasn't hackers that powered through their firewall. They got an employee's credentials, so they didn't have to hack. They had a key. They had a user ID and password, and once they were in, they started copying off data from everywhere they could find in the network. That is the type of attack that if you're all concentrated on building stronger and stronger and stronger walls, what happens is if someone does get inside the walls, all of your gold and jewels are laid bare to them. That's what happened with the NSA. Edward Snowden was an insider. He didn't have to hack anything. He got to come right into the facility, walk in the door, and sign on to the network. But what he also did was copy things off on disk drives. And you know what? That happens every day with disgruntled employees, former employees, employees that are thinking about leaving, or, in the case of Sony, with people that find compromised credentials, find their way in and start stealing information. So I don't think Sony did anything wrong, as in malicious or even foolish. What they did was they were embracing the old paradigm of strengthen the network and we'll be okay. And what leaders in the industry are beginning to realize is what you need to do. While you need a good, strong network perimeter, you need to start protecting the data itself. Protect the emails and the documents and the spreadsheets and the reports. Because if you can lock down the individual pieces of information, that way if somebody does get through your network, your perimeter defenses, they may copy a whole bunch of files, but they've copied encrypted files they can't open. So that's really where Sony could have done better. And if I were the CISO at Sony, what I would be doing right now is finding technologies that could identify confidential and sensitive data anywhere in my business on file servers or desktops, that could classify it, that could encrypt it, so that as long as it's a real and valid person that is supposed to have clearance to that, he can open that document, that spreadsheet, that report. So these are the kind of things that got them in trouble, or the emails.
Right.
But if somebody copies 1 million documents off on a USB drive and sends it to the Guardian, posts it on the internet, doesn't matter, because even if it's available publicly on the internet, you can see it, but as soon as you click in it and try and open it, it won't open for you because you don't have the right credentials. That's the approach that Sony needs to start taking today.
Do you happen to know of a website or organization that enables people to find these types of best practices, like looking at more of the internal data than just focusing on firewalls? Is there a go-to place for that?
I think you're starting to see go-to consortium. So I don't know if there's a single website. Info Security Buzz happens to be one website that's spending more and more of their time on data-centric security. You're at the NAB show,
right.
But next week in San Francisco is the RSA show. RSA is probably the industry's single largest information security conference. But there are others. Last week there was an InfoSec, 2 weeks ago there was InfoSec in Orlando. In May there's an InfoSec in London. So you're starting to see conferences and expositions like this very specifically and clearly around information security. The other place I'd go would be the ISACA conferences, because that's where you're finding information security professionals gathering together. And some of the key technology leaders are starting to spend a lot of time not on network security, but data-centric security, most notably Microsoft. With their Azure strategy, Microsoft wants to be a cloud leader. They're making great gains in the cloud market vis-a-vis Amazon. But Microsoft now offers very strong data-centric ways to encrypt emails and documents and spreadsheets no matter who you are using the Azure Rights Management Platform. And I think if you start watching vendors like that, you're going to have a better and better indication of where the industry is going.
Okay, great. We talked about different types of ways that we can go about encryption. We have BES, BlackBerry has theirs. We have PGP, which is pretty good encryption. Also AES, and we have the RSA as well. How does the RSA and the PGP and all that, how do they compare to each other?
You could do a matrix of how many bits is your encryption. Yours is 64, mine's 256. So, hey, mine's a lot harder to crack, but the next guy's going to be 1024. Here's the real key. I don't care what kind of encryption you have. If somebody doesn't use it, it's worthless, right? So you could say AES encryption is what we use because we're partnered with Microsoft with their Active Directory rights management services. 256 bits on data, 1024 on private keys, 2048 on master keys, really good and strong stuff. But if somebody comes out tomorrow with a 4,096-bit encryption, does it mean it's better? Well, I don't know. I think the key is if you're a bank with 10,000 users or an oil company with 50,000 users, the encryption is only as good as the people that use it. So if you have an encryption solution, but it requires that every time it's used, your employee has to take 3 or 4 or 5 extra steps to do an email, and then the guy he sends it to has to do 5 or 6 extra steps. Look, that's not going to get used very long. That's not going to get used for most of your stuff. But if you have something that any time I do an email or a document or a spreadsheet, if that has confidential or sensitive information, the user doesn't have to do anything. The system automatically knows that it's confidential. The system classifies it appropriately. The system encrypts it. And the guy on the other side, if he's a valid party to receive it, he doesn't do anything different. He just opens his email.
Right.
Or he goes to the file server and clicks on the Excel spreadsheet. Or he goes to the Dropbox and opens the presentation if he has the right credentials. So I think the key is not us getting wrapped up in is PGP better than AES, is better than XYZ. I think the key is the solution that uses that encryption, is it transparent and ubiquitous so that as much as possible can everything in my organization be protected by it? Because that's really the key.
I think I used to work for the Centers for Disease Control, and we worked on a project called Documentum, which enables you to have like 8 people and everybody's different levels. You have the guy who's the PhD creating the content,
right,
and then you have all these other people in different varying levels of they're contributing to a document. So when we first started on this project, we had a grandiose idea. We'd have 8 people, and it would automatically shoot out an email to the next person when they're done approving it. So you have 8 approvers, all just for one piece of document that we get. But as we started working with them, we started realizing we had to take about 5 of those off because it just got to be too much. So we ended up having about 3 people who had to approve each article or each document going through because some people would be on vacation, so it could take possibly 2 months before that document gets out. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think document management has always been a challenge. Documentum, as you mentioned, great leader in the field, now owned by EMC. Document management is a very complex process. And I think what most of the industry finds out is that very sophisticated document management tools like Documentum work really well in certain verticals. Usually the verticals that are very, very, very highly controlled. They're government, as you said, pharma, and things like that. The problem is if you work for a telecom company, or if you work for an average bank or insurance company or even a technology manufacturer or an airline, it slows your business down too much to use a complex document management solution. So I think what's happened is the industry has said, wait a minute, let's walk before we run, before we fly. I'm less worried about having 3 people over 5 people over 8 people that are approving things. I'm less worried about every change. You know what I'm more worried about? That I have confidential information that leaks out because it was put into a Dropbox, or because an employee left the company, or because somebody else gained access to our system and copied stuff. That's a far bigger problem. That's a prevalent problem. So let's work on that first. A lot of the same principles apply, which is controlled access, restricted access, and restricted activities. Who can print, who can save, who can copy. So I think what the industry has done is take a lot of what we learned in the document management world from people like Documento over the years and applied that to a broader base, but in a much more streamlined manner. And that's what you see today being called data-centric information security.
Oh, great. So my takeoff on data-centric, I've heard the word, I never quite understood it, but it's every single .doc file, every single file is actually being some type of protection. So it's, instead of being more focused on firewalls and getting into the system.
Right.
It's really focused on looking at each individual piece of document that's on that server. One of the things too I just want to ask about is the term intranet, which typically means there's an intranet and there's no way at all, hopefully, that anybody can breach that. And then you have your internet, which is open and could have some potential. Have you found that intranets do have a lot more security than an internet?
Well, intranet is actually not a term you will hear as much today as you would 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Very, very popular term 10 years ago. And why was that? Because the internet meant a publicly accessible network, and the intranet meant a secure network. Well, that was very valid when you would go to work every day to a corporate campus, and you went through the door, and you went to your office and went to your workstation, and only when you got to your workstation could you start accessing things like your email and file servers and things like that, because you were in a secure facility on a controlled network. Face it, the introduction of two things, that being BYOD devices and the cloud, have destroyed the concept of a secure network. You really don't have an intranet anymore. You could say that you do with VPN tunneling technology, which is very important technology, but honestly, most CISOs and CIOs will tell you, yes, we have employees, we have our top executives, they're traveling around doing critical confidential emails on their Android devices. They are going over massively secretive business plans on their iPads, sitting at the pool watching their kids. They're not even in a corporate facility. They're not on an intranet. They're at Starbucks, for God's sakes, doing really important work to our business.
Yeah.
Because of that, the concept of an internet and a separate intranet has kind of gone away. People have pretty much said, I have to admit, I have to realize, I just have to let myself understand there is only the internet. So if there is only the internet, then what am I going to do to secure and protect anything that my company has that is sensitive and confidential that might travel over that internet? I'm sitting here with an Android phone right now. Guess what? I can't tell you how many confidential emails today. Those traveled over a cellular network. I have already done numerous documents and spreadsheets today that have been sent back and forth that I reviewed on my phone. I haven't been on any intranet. However, each one of those sensitive mails, each one of those sensitive documents, and a couple of them I pulled off of Dropbox, they were encrypted and secured, so it doesn't matter if they were emailed to me, if they were sent to me on Wi-Fi, or if I pulled them out of a Dropbox, wherever they were, in transit, at rest, or in use. They were encrypted, and they could only be opened by somebody like me that has the appropriate credentials. That's where the world has gone now that they have realized there really is no such thing as an intranet anymore.
Yeah, you mentioned the term sandbox, and typically that, coming from an IT background, it's an area that's secure. But how does Watchful software secure sandboxes?
So what we do is, I wouldn't say that we secure sandboxes, because sandboxes by their nature are supposed to be at least quasi-secure. What we do is we secure the information that's placed into a sandbox. So sandbox is a term you often hear used with BYOD devices, mobile phones, tablets, right? And a sandbox, if you will, is an area of that device that only certain approved applications can access, and only the data from those applications can access it. Depending how strictly controlled your organization is, maybe they don't let data go outside the sandbox. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't let other things go into it. So that's where you see this whole emerging field of the MDM, or mobile device manufacturing vendors like Mobile Iron, AirWatch, and more recently, Microsoft has made a huge push into this space with their Intune offering, their Azure Intune. So when you have a sandbox on your employees' mobile devices, that is I don't know that I'll call it a security. It's a controlled area. It's where you can't enter and run other non-approved applications. Sometimes the data may or may not be restricted that goes in there, but what we're doing is we're working with large organizations, customers, and some of the MDM partners like Microsoft and Mobile Iron and Good Technology, so that encrypted information can easily be distributed throughout the network and be put into these sandboxes, so that whether it's inside the sandbox or out, or if it slips outside the sandbox, or if it's an application in the sandbox, it's encrypted data that goes in there. So again, only people with authorized credentials can open and use that email, that document, that spreadsheet.
Okay, great. So one of the things that we've seen is people coming in who are system administrators, and they've got a super password, so they can pretty much go anywhere, and they could reform hard drives if they were disgruntled. And we also talk about biometrics. What are some of the things that you've seen with biometrics and disgruntled employees have been fired and that sort of thing?
Well, disgruntled employees are always a problem, especially if you don't have tight control of credentials. Imagine a disgruntled employee who's quit, but your IT has good control over deleting or changing passwords. And orphan passwords are a huge problem everywhere in the world today. So you might have a disgruntled employee that still finds a way into the system and he can wreak some havoc, right? Or he steals somebody else's password, so when he leaves, he knew he was going to leave. He watched carefully and he got somebody else's user ID and password. He's been fired. His password is turned off, but guess what? He knows the user ID and password of the cubicle mate next to him. That's a huge problem, especially in today's perimeterless world. So what you see is an emergence of new technologies like e-biometrics. E-biometrics says, how do you secure a system if somebody knows the password but they're not the right person? What are biometrics? They're an indicator that you are who you say you are. A password is an indication that you know something an authorized person is supposed to know, but only biometrics says, yes, you are in fact backpack Baron, not some other guy that just knows his password. Biometrics historically have required hardware to work, fingerprint readers, palm readers, and iris scanners. Now we're moving to technologies that are e-biometrics. E-biometrics are software-only technologies that need no hardware, that determine you are who you are by the way you interact with the system. For example, Baron, the way you type on a keyboard is unique to you as your fingerprint. It can be modeled with greater than 99% accuracy. It's the speed, the rhythm, and the tempo, the difference in your right hand and your left hand, certain combinations like hitting the space bar after the period. All these things go together to say, this is the muscle memory that Backpack Baron has taught himself to use a keyboard. That can be modeled, just like your fingerprint. So maybe you sign onto your system with your user ID and password, and you start working away. And then you go to lunch, but you leave your system on. I'm a disgruntled employee, either that's about to be fired or even has been fired. I walk in behind you, you're already signed on, I get a hold of your keyboard, I could do a lot of damage. But what happens if 20, 30 seconds later, the system says, wait a minute, you're not Backpack Baron anymore. Although he signed onto the system and left the door open, you're not him anymore. Because you interact differently. You type faster or slower, your left hand's faster, or you hit certain combinations differently with one hand than you do the other hand. And it can lock the system and require any number of higher level challenges, like a challenge password, or even invoke the webcam to take a picture of the person and have security unlock it. So what we're seeing is because of the different types of threat vectors that we're seeing, it's no longer just a bunch of hackers in Russia trying to crash the firewall and bring the system down. It's highly specific, highly methodical people that quite often don't want to bring the system down. They don't want to bring any attention to it because they want to steal the data. You have to know if somebody is in your system that shouldn't be there. So what do? You protect the data with data-centric security, but maybe you also deploy a layer of defenses like e-biometrics that says even if someone is signed on, they have to act and operate in the way that authorized employee would. And that's where I think you're seeing a lot of new developments in around identity and access control.
Yeah, that's all great. One of the examples we brought up, too, was a terrorist potentially following someone who works at a nuclear facility and grabbing their badge, and then suddenly they have access. So this is an area that will also help in that scenario. There's lots of scenarios that this is, so many different layers. I think one of the things we always run into, I took project management planning, and we always have time, money, and resources. Those are all those constraints. So, when you talk to the Sony people, they might have not thrown on a lot of this stuff because they're worried about it's going to slow them down. They want to get stuff out. They want to get products out. So it's all about sales. There's a saying, nothing happens till something gets sold.
Right.
So, how have you ever looked at the whole PMP and, the time, money, and resources, and how does that fit in with security?
So I have been in IT for over 30 years, and strict project planning, as you talked about, has been a part of it, because I was trained by IBM, who I consider to be one of the finest companies ever to grace the face of the planet. Tremendous company, taught me a lot. And so whenever you deploy a project in IT, the first thing you kind of have to realize is if I invest millions in this and nobody uses it, it's a failure. I don't care how solid it is, right? And if I invest millions in it and they use it because they have to, but it's really painful for them, they will find ways either not to use it, or they will find ways to make it fail, or they will find ways to get me fired. Those are all bad endings. So the key is, if I identify a technology that can help my company, how do I get it done in such a way that it doesn't stand in the way of my employees? Security is the quintessential example of that. It is the dynamic tension between keep our business secure and keep our business nimble, right?
Right.
If you tell employees you have to think of a new password every day, and it has to be a minimum of 24 characters, and it has to be mixed upper and lowercase, alphanumeric with special characters, they're going to tell you, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You're taxing my brain. I can't do my job.
Yeah.
So there's only certain lengths you could go to. But what I think you're seeing more and more is that people are investing time and effort in selecting technologies that can take a certain rule set for the company, a set of policies for the organization, and employ those without the users having to be involved. Information security is a great example. What we have learned from things like Sony and the NSA and others, Target, JP Morgan Chase breach that happened more recently. I'll use the example of PII. Everybody knows what PII is now, personally identifiable information. So security number, credit card number, etc. You know, that's become a very hot topic. It's not difficult anymore to say if there's an email, a document, a spreadsheet, a presentation, a report that has PII, mark that as confidential and encrypt it. And you can do that now in such a way that the employee doesn't have to worry about it. If I'm a data entry clerk and I'm entering cells into an Excel spreadsheet and it is Social Security numbers, if you say I've got to remember that this is Social Security numbers, and I have to remember to classify it, and I have to remember to invoke a third-party program to encrypt it, and I have to remember to put a watermark and a header and a footer, I'm not going to do that. But if you have technology that will identify that, you know what, that workbook has Social Security numbers in it, mark it, tag it, encrypt it, and that way the employee doesn't have to do anything about it, that's how you're getting initiatives that get done, that get used, and bring a return to the business.
Yeah, one thing Apple has just rolled out is that Pay, where it sends out a unique code through the phone. And what are your thoughts on that, the Apple ID or Apple Pay system?
I think that's a great example of multi-factor authentication that a lot of companies are embracing now. The banking industry is very much there, where if you want to do a transaction, they will say that's a transaction that involves a certain amount of funds transfer. I'm going to send you a code to your mobile phone, and you have to access that code and then enter it into our system. So that's a great example of multi-factor authentication. I think e-biometrics is another great example, and I think you'll start seeing more and more and more, because it's all about, I can't trust who you are just because you signed on. I need to take a second or a third level step. So Apple Pay has one approach. I think enterprises, see, that doesn't work if you work for a corporate enterprise and you're doing 100 of those transactions a day. You're not going to sit there every time and wait for a one-time key. So you have to find other ways to have strong authentication. That's where e-biometrics comes in.
Well, it's been great talking with you. I think I do have to ask this one question. You don't have to comment on it, but there's been the whole thing with Hillary and the server stuff. I don't know. Do you want to make any comments on that, or you're welcome to say no comment on that?
Oh, I don't no comment on almost anything. So that's not a term you normally hear out of my mouth. Look, I don't want to pick on Hillary, but that is a great example of one of the most difficult dynamics that information security executives face, and that is privileged people act like privileged people. They act like they're above the policies, and they operate outside of the policies. And by doing so, they put the entire organization at risk. Hillary Clinton happens to be an example of that. She was the Secretary of State. She was the architect of our foreign policy for an entire country. And she operated outside of the parameters that were established. And by the way, were established to keep this country safe. She made a choice. I am going to be the person in the State Department that is not subject to the rules. Why? In her own words, because it was inconvenient. Because it was inconvenient to be secure, she operated in an insecure environment, and it's already been documented, this isn't me, she was hacked. She was breached. As a result of that, I don't think we'll ever know what information leaked out. We might not know for years. What we know is that she was dealing with situations like Benghazi, Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as North Korea, and she was operating in an insecure environment that was hacked. And it was only for one reason. She chose to operate outside the rules because she thought she was beyond the rules because, in her words, it was inconvenient. That is something that happens every day with CEOs like myself, with vice presidents, with executive vice presidents. Sometimes the guys with the most authority are the biggest violators of protocol because the higher you are in the organization, theoretically, the more valuable your time is, and if you can save time, you can have a bigger impact. But you got to be careful, and I think that's a great challenge for the CISOs of this world, because they have to politically say, how do I keep these wild men in check and not lose my job? You can't just go to the Secretary of State and say, I demand right now you start using the State Department servers. My guess is the guy tried that gentle, simple approach and was unsuccessful. And I can tell you, if you were the CISO for a Fortune 500 company and you start telling your VPs and EVPs what they can and cannot do, it's going to be pretty sticky. So how do you put technology in place that even though those people are operating in a high convenience mode, the security is done for them? That's kind of where we got to go, and I think that's the lesson we learned from Hillary.
Yeah, it's amazing. She was the number 2 intelligence officer in the country, but we can always improve. Try to always take away and get solutions from this. So we're with Chuck Foley, Watchful Software, watchfulsoftware.com. What are some of the takeaways from this interview that you'd like to get out to everybody? Just kind of the high-level things.
I think the key summary is that we're in a new paradigm right now where the entire industry is moving from network-centric security to data-centric security. They're moving away from secure the borders because they've realized that now that we have BYOD in the cloud, there are no borders to secure. So let's stop trying to secure our borders with every nickel we have. We need to start concentrating on the data. We need to find ways that we identify, classify, mark and tag, and protect that data which could be sensitive. And we need to do it in such a way that it doesn't burden our end users because they're not going to take the time and effort to do it. Technology needs to be smart enough to do it for them. Further, we need to find a way to make sure that some of our greatest liabilities are our people. There are people when they do something foolish, or they make an honest mistake, or they might do something malicious, like a disgruntled employee or an employee that's thinking about leaving. And so we need to have ways that not only is the data protected, but that our systems constantly know who is and who isn't addressing and using them. I think if you can put all that together, you're gonna find yourself 100 miles ahead, and you're not gonna end up being a Sony or an NSA on the front page.
So what are some other ways listeners can get a hold of you?
Well, number one, visit our website at www.watchfulsoftware.com. There's actually a button there that you can request a demo or a webinar. We work through global channel partners around the world. We have distribution in 10 countries with over 150 certified trained partners. We are regularly at events like this, be it RSA or InfoSec or Secure World Expos. So come see us at some of the events. You can find them on the events page on our home site. We spend a lot of time with large customers sitting down talking what we see around the world in terms of best practices from other companies maybe in their verticals, and we're more than happy to do it with any one of your listeners.
Yeah, this has been great. We really enjoyed having you on. And what are your plans in 2015?
We're building a dynamic business. So our plans in 2015 are grow by helping our customers secure their data, sleep better at night, and make their boards of directors happy.
Well, that's great. You're doing a fantastic job. It's been a wonderful interview. It really comes down to security and making sure that we don't see these types of things in the future. Looking forward and having those best practices. I hope everybody can check out watchfulsoftware.com and learn more about how they can protect all their data and make all of us more secure. So, Voice of the Global Freedom, magnifiedview.com. Here with Chuck Foley on the floor of the National Association of Broadcasters, NMX, and Las Vegas, Nevada. It's been a great show. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, we're back. What an incredible interview.
Really was well done, Backpack. That's why you're pressed. You find the right people. I don't know how you did the needle in the haystack with Charles. You did a great job. Did I understand they booked him to come on the program live with us?
Yeah, we were really honored to have such an expert come on, and really he just is explaining it so that all of us can understand it without. There's a lot of techies that I ran into, but when I started talking to them, they were talking down in the weeds about zeros and ones, and that people hear that and they get turned off. So he was the one in a million person to come in contact with.
The mainstay of counterintelligence against espionage, of course, is you're probably protected from outside, like Charles said, and you're vulnerable inside. That's an old golden rule. I've got a Yoda anecdote for you, like an anecdote. Back in the 50s, there's a NATO intelligence school in southern Germany, in Oberammergau. It's above Garmisch-Partenkirchen, stuck in the gingerbread houses and mountains of Bavaria. Wonderful place there. Bunch of buildings above ground. It was set in a airplane factory the Nazis used. It was all underground. So here's the NATO intel school merrily going around. A guy cut the grass with a bunch of sheep, a flock of sheep actually. German guy, he wore lederhosen, the leather things they wear, and he wore the Bavarian hat, and he claimed to be Christian, and instead of Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, he would say Grüß Gott, as they say in Bavaria. Well, fast forwarding here, this little guy who ran the sheep around turned out to be a Russian KGB colonel.
Wow.
So one day, the good sheep herder Russian KGB colonel made off with a state.
Wow.
In an Opel Capitan. So a flash message went out. That's to get a hold of this guy. People can be in the intel business for careers and never see a flash message, but one came out on this guy. I don't know that they ever caught him or not, but the point that Charles made is people always look externally. They want bigger fences and a higher concertina barbed wire and guys with guns and moats with alligators, and they keep doing that, but they're not looking at the real risk which occurs from inside. Hell of an interview, Backpack. Well done. Well done.
It was great, and I really enjoyed when I worked at the Centers for Disease Control. I did have to go through a security clearance background check, and we had badges where we had to go through the doors and all that. And it was a great experience. One of the things we talked about was documentum and being able to really check out from a content level. So there's several different ways with dealing with data, but the major purpose of this was to make sure that the right audience is looking at a document, because the Centers for Disease Control is very concerned about the quality of work that gets out, and they before they publish anything. So they don't want to, this is a major, huge government organization, so they want to have really, really good content, but there's always that thing between the time getting it out and also making sure, and that's what MagnifiedView.com is also about. We make sure we spend sometimes months on articles because we don't want to just put something out without it being thoroughly researched. So that's an area as well, and I know Yoda spent a tremendous amount of time on MagnifiedView.com articles, and that's one that differentiates MagnifiedView.com from other news sources that just quickly, hurriedly slap something together.
We're not alternative news like they say. We are analysis and news that our listeners can use. We also, under the direction of our editor-in-chief, John Araman, we always provide actionable methods, tactics, and strategies, as you said earlier, to survive and thrive in these dangerous, troubled times. Well, really well done on that interview. I don't know how you do it out there, but you do good. Keep doing it. You've got some other shows you're setting up, don't you?
Yeah, we're excited. We're having, on May the 2nd, Secretary of Education, veteran, Peg, she'll be coming on, and she's very talking about how the Common Core it's called the Communist Core. We're going to do a whole piece around that. And she's very, we've already interviewed with her initially, and we're excited to have her come on and talk about this ridiculous Common Core. She pointed out that Ben Carson, who is potentially running for president, who's a neurosurgeon, if he had grown up in the current school systems with Communist Core, he would end up being a gardener instead of a neurosurgeon. Is that not unbelievable?
What a colossal mess. They're currently, little kids in elementary school in Arabic are pledging allegiance to Allah. They're dressing up having Islam Day. They're practicing Sharia law in our elementary school. This is glad you got that gal coming on. The whole Common Core is absolute. You can readily find it on the internet. It will tell you it's unvarnished communism and it's Islam. That's just what it is. Look past the first couple pages and you'll get down to the curriculum. The first couple pages are deceptive. It's all stuff like, we need more science and mathematics and all that, but if you get to the real of it, it is pro-Islam and unvarnished communism back there. Glad you got her coming on. We'll all learn from that, won't we?
Yeah, we've also been staying on top of social media a lot and getting a lot of comments. Check us out at My Human Compass on Twitter. The handle is My Human Compass, and one of the things that we're seeing now is that people are saying vote Hillary for president in 2016. One of the takeaways we got from this interview was about Hillary and her entitlement. She felt like she's just going to have a private server, and not only that, she just deletes thousands of emails now that we found out, and this is just unheard of. We've never heard of anything like this in the United States history. This is unprecedented. So there's possibilities maybe she will go to prison in 2016 because of this.
Don't know, but our sources, we've been at this so long, or certainly I have, not you young guys, but I learned early on that she was hacked. In fact, the Prime Minister of Germany was angry that our NSA had bugged her cell phone. So early word we had from the insider's insider, is that among everybody else, I suppose, except Paraguay or somebody, had locked onto her emails way back. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just unbelievable that, and unheard of that anything's happened, that the number 2 intelligence officer in the United States of America would use a private server and just delete everything. And, what was really going on? The Clinton family has been embroiled with a lot of scandals, and now we're seeing a lot of stuff where they're running, she's going to try to run for president, but now we're seeing a lot of people are saying she should run for prison in 2016. So.
Well, when the good President Obama took office, he insisted on running around with his BlackBerry. Virtually everything he and she, sex state, does is classified at one level or another. So I know from our sources there was a tug-of-war with the Secret Service and other agencies. They found it outrageous that he wanted to run around with an open BlackBerry. I don't know the disposition of that. He still got the BlackBerry, but I don't know how they hardened it or made it secure. I just don't know. It's outrageous, really.
Yeah, it really is unbelievable. I think, and as our president of Watchful Software, Charles Chuck Foley, pointed out, we won't even know the amount of damage that this has caused our country. It's just beyond imagine right now.
Oh, you won't know for years. Strange times. There's a great ancient Chinese curse. It's a curse. May you live in interesting times. Don't we really live in interesting times?
Yeah, we do. And this technology is always changing, and it's good to stay on top of it. Go to meet people like president of Watchful Software and talk with them and get them on the shows. And we're really staying on top of a lot of things. We've had some incredible guests, such as Brigadier General Audino, Brigadier General Johnny Michel, in some of our past episodes, and we've learned a tremendous amount. Mr. Craig Reed, he's talking about what the Russians are doing in their exercises, trying to take over the Antarctic. It's amazing some of the guests that we've had on, isn't it?
Oh, and many you've scheduled. You get a lot of credit for that. I don't know how you find it. Well, more are asking us to come on now. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, Well, we've had a great lineup, but we've really been privileged to be on a lot of other shows too as well, and talk about all these topics about securing our borders and how we can make Americans safer in this dangerous, troubled times.
I'm excited about working with Greg Martin, a.k.a. Stryker. He's cranking up the Leading Edge network. It's a radio network of 5 channels. One is conservative talk radio. Another channel is music from some era or another. The third one is a Christian channel. The fourth is other music. And the fifth I'm excited about is a military law enforcement channel. Really excited to be joining Stryker. We all elite teams, as the audience knows, have nicknames. Greg Martin's nickname is Stryker. He was actually a professional golfer. Incredible guy. He owned a bunch of businesses. Now this Leading Edge network is going public, so we're excited to be a part of that, are we not, Becca?
Yeah, we're honored and privileged to be working with LeadingEdgeRadioNetwork.com. Please go check out the website and great channels out there. I want to also say congratulations to Stryker. His teenage son just placed third in a golf tournament. He placed fifth last year, but now he placed third. So Stryker has a background as being a professional golfer, and what an incredible success that what a future his son is holding in the future. Wow.
Oh, the lad didn't fall far from the tree, did he?
Yeah, so yeah, when I was talking to him when I was live in Las Vegas on the floor of all these incredible conferences that I was at and trade shows, and he was so proud. He was just, I could feel through the phone when we were talking, and just grinning ear to ear. He just so proud of his son.
Oh, Betty, what a great guy to work with.
Yeah, he really is. Just what a wonderful guy, and we are so fortunate to be working with Stryker and Leading Edge Radio Network.
We have a heck of a group, inner circle, where work. Tim Kalin out of Impact Analytics, Garbo out of the Conservative Talk Radio Directory. We're proud to be part of the board of directors of that directory and featured on it. We're working closely with Annie, whose nickname is Streetwalker. That's a story of its own. She heads up a great program called Southern Sense. How'd she get that nickname?
Oh, that's a great question. She actually was a copper in the streets of Manhattan, which, as you can imagine, is pretty rough. One of the roughest areas of town. She had to go to some really tougher areas like Brooklyn and some of the other areas. But her mom at one point wasn't quite sure, I think, when she initially started law enforcement, and she didn't really know, and so her mom called her a streetwalker. And
I love it.
And that was a big part of it. It was all on foot. And as you would know, Yoda, with your extensive law enforcement background, what are some of the differences between being a foot patrol officer versus someone who's in a car driving around?
All the difference in the world. The beat guy in New York, they cover a couple blocks, so merely a couple blocks. So they get to know everybody, they make a lot of friends, they get a lot of information. Many people are neutral towards them. A lot of good people like them, they help them. And the coppers help the store owners and such, and the bad guys fear and despise them, so foot patrol's wonderful. Unfortunately, out here and elsewhere, you cover such large areas, out here being California, that not much foot patrol out here. You got to get in those one-man cars, and you don't meet as many people in the same circumstances.
Well, some of your experiences, and we've known other people working in the projects, some of the things where you meet people and they have a barbecue and they'll be friendly and they'll serve you food when you really get to know people in some of the projects, and they realize, a lot of the people do there realize how important it is to have a police presence there.
Yeah, projects in government housing, I found, are largely misunderstood. You've got a lot of people there trying to get by every day, like most people are in these days. You got some really outstanding good people. There's a tragedy of fatherless families. The stupid government pays the women to have children. The more they have, the more money they get. They're not allowed to have a husband there. So that's one of these stupid welfare things that destroys the family. But you find a lot of good people and some bad people there. In my project, government housing work, about every fifth apartment was a wonderful barbecue. I haven't eaten as good since.
All those are incredible stories. I've seen the just some knowledge of what the projects are like, and it really is a whole different way. And just to have some undercover experience there, it really has shown what it's like. But I do see a lot of the biggest thing that we're looking at is to try to have a mother and a father. We see a lot of single moms running around, and they really need a dad. That's kind of one of the major things that we're seeing in America. It's really lacking.
We need to talk about our buddy, the lieutenant from Las Vegas, Lieutenant Sutton, who's heading up in his organization. It's well known now that the Obama administration is attacking our own law enforcement. They're just raising hell out of Ferguson and elsewhere now. Every little incident is filmed in our society, and some big incidents. I don't know what his motives are, but his whole administration is just knocking hell out of the police that protect it. It's a damn shame, isn't it, Backpack?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing now is that the AR-15 isn't being allowed or in the police, which they really desperately need that type of a weapon. And we're hearing reports that people from the sheriff's office have to go to gun shows to buy bullets now. Can you believe that?
I've had personal experience with that. The two SWAT teams, two northern San Diego SWAT teams, literally went to a gun show to buy their own ammunition because the administration is cutting them off, whereas they bought billions, with a B, billions of bullets for Department of Homeland Security. No one has an answer or rationalization for that. They brought on what's-her-name in front of Congress. What was her name? Napolitano?
Right.
And her feeble answer was that she got a good deal. Well, there's no good deal on ammunition because it dates, like pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So I have no idea about what the hell they're going to do with billions of rounds.
Wow.
For Department of Homeland Security. That's made up of 20-odd organizations like the Secret Service, like the Coast Guard, like ICE, like the Border Patrol. Well, hell, each one of those people can be shooting guns all day long and not go through these rounds, this ammunition. Ridiculous, really.
Yeah, it really is amazing that where things are going, and like you said, the Chinese curse. We have to jump into the change and make the best solutions that work. And as we've talked about cybersecurity and all of this, we do want to say, please go check out defendingtheshield.org, which our great friend Lieutenant Randy Sutton out of Vegas, he is leading up as the national spokesperson for that, and we're looking to get him on a lot more radio shows and a lot more exposure. So he's really doing a lot for the Thin Blue Line.
Cop's cop. He was in 5 firefights in his career, 5 gunfights in his career. Most coppers throughout the country don't get in one in a 20-year career, you can imagine. He saved people by getting in 5. He got some great stories between cops. Had a malfunction of a pistol in one, my word, and got out of that somehow.
Yeah,
We've got some music and EE Pros coming on, don't we?
Yeah, we do. He had to change to a 38. It locked up on him, and he never went back. He never looked back after that.
No, he went. He went out and bought a 45.
Or 45, yeah. So.
Like everybody else.
So
the old cop joke is one was little old lady saw the big gun and said, "Why do you have that big 45?" And he responded, "Because they don't make a 46."
So we're going to take a a short break here, and we'll be right back. Energy Efficiency Pros, EE Pros, solutions that save you money. Are you a commercial business looking to reduce costs on your energy bill? Replacing traditional light bulbs with LED results in tremendous savings every month. Commercial, industrial, and manufacturing facilities from coast to coast are saving up to 90% on their skyrocketing costs of energy. Energy costs are rising every month, but using EE Pros lighting saves money, time, and will bring you happier employees and customers. For a free audit and evaluation of your facility, contact or email Don Arrigo, President of EE Pros, at 480-585-9161, 480-585-9161. Tell Don that Backpack of Voices of Global Freedom referred you. Yoda, have you had some experience with this?
I have a bit. It's a matter of fact that EE Pros is saving people 80% of, mind you, 80% on their ever-increasing power bills. Isn't that tremendous?
Yes, wow.
Sounds too good to be true, but it's true. Give Don a buzz, please.
Go to eepros.com. I say again, www.eepros.com. We're back with Voices of Global Freedom, MagnifyView.com. We want to announce our patriotic American hero. This is Backpack. We're telling you about one of our brave American heroes, Brigadier General Ernest C. Audino, United States Army, retired, currently serves as Senior Advisor to the Kurdistan National Assembly of Syria. He also serves as Senior Vice President of Radon Corporation. General, AUDINO.wordpress.com. I say again, General, AUDINO.wordpress.com. Yoda, are we privileged to be working with General Audino?
My word, he's a soldier. He was embedded with the Kurds with a small team in the north of Syria or Iraq. He lived with them, ate with them, slept with them, was wounded there and decorated. It's quite a guy with a small team to go live with tribal people like the Kurds fighting ISIS. Just one hell of a soldier, Backpack. Well done.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The people that we've had on, and we've done 2 episodes in the past, so please go check out the 2 interviews that we did with General Audino and the President of Kurdistan, which were really incredible interviews. These are so many things that the Voices of Global Freedom and MagnifyedView.com that you're not hearing on mainstream media, so to speak, and that's what we're all about.
You've got, if you would, brother, introduce our friend who goes under the name IQ. The fellow offered care in the evil Muslim Brotherhood. That's the brotherhood that President Obama and Hillary Clinton thought wonderful. It's the transcendent, the umbrella organization over all of Al-Qaeda and ISIS now. He offered them $1 million if they could prove any of his exposés wrong, didn't he?
That's right. He's also one of the really sensational guests that we've had on a previous episode. We want to tell our audience to please go check out that one as well. It's really incredible. I just saw President Obama on TV, and it looked like to me he had a Muslim Brotherhood little badge on his vest that he was wearing, his whatever jacket that he has. He was, instead of the United States flags, I saw Muslim Brotherhood on there.
Amazing, truly amazing times. The czars we haven't heard too much about lately, our brotherhood. He's got 2 of them with direct connections. This is easily found, wonderful audience. We wouldn't be a show without you out there. Easily found. Just go to a search engine. There are 1 Muslim Brotherhood and 1 Al-Qaeda direct link serving in senior positions in the Department of Homeland Security. It's absolutely preposterous. In my experience, I've traveled from Morocco to Egypt and North Africa. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan. I existed around the Arabian Peninsula. You cannot be a Muslim with a small M. You can be a Catholic with a small C. You can take your mother to church once a year at Easter. You can be a Presbyterian or a Baptist, or you can't be a Muslim. Every molecule of their being, every minute of their day and night, is devoted to Islam. Islam, the word in Arabic, means submission. They live now among us practicing Sharia law at home quietly. They go to grade school and high school and rush back home. The abomination, that's the president, is bringing 500,000 Syrians in. I say 500,000 Syrians. Many of them are young males that fit terrorist profiles. Intelligence estimates are a conservative 10% of these are terrorists. Let me do the math. Well, you're the math guy. You're the computer guy. Sounds like 50,000 to me.
Right. Yeah, and we have a breaking article on MagnifiedView.com where we're exposing the terror camps from sea to shining sea. We've also worked with Captain Marshall Frank, who's also been on our show before. And these are insider information. These are people really in the know that there's over 35, at least, terrorist camp trainings around the United States. Now they're reporting that ISIS is in all 50 states, and they're all being held in these mosques, and they're doing stuff that we don't even know what's going on. And we had a Ryan Morrow with the Clarion Project recently, and he's really active in trying to shut that down or bring reports to FBI about the terror camps. But the FBI has to declare them as communal living. They're not allowed to use the word Islam. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I do. You've got a recording, don't you, from your man, Missoula?
Yeah, we're going to go through this incredible recording that's really taking off on YouTube. If you go, you can hear another version of the recording on Voices of Global Freedom. If you Google that along with Voices of Global Freedom YouTube, you'll find some of the other incredible videos that we're putting together. We're going to do a lot more videos and working carefully with IQ. He also has had a fatwa issued against him, so he's had to use an alias name. He's been under a lot of threats, and we've also had numerous people who are apostates, including Nani Darwish, who luckily escaped from Egypt, whose father was a general, and that's another great interview that we've had. And we were having Christopher Logan on soon, who's really going to expose a lot of the Muslim menace going on. But we're going to go ahead and play part of this, and we're going to talk about some of the sections of this incredible YouTube video that's going viral.
Please forward a link to this video so that people may learn the basics of Islam. And please keep in mind that the term Islamophobia is an oxymoron, since having a phobia means having an irrational fear. Fearing Islam, which wants 80% of humanity enslaved or exterminated, is totally rational, and hence cannot possibly be called a phobia. This video is not limited to any one religion, but the following is true. The shoe bomber was a Muslim. The Beltway snipers were Muslims. The Fort Hood shooter was a Muslim. The underwear bomber was a Muslim. The USS Cole bombers were Muslims. The Madrid train bombers were Muslims. The Bali nightclub bombers were Muslims. The London subway bombers were Muslims. The Moscow theater attackers were Muslims. The Boston Marathon bombers were Muslims. The Pan Am Flight Number 93 bombers were Muslims. The Air France Entebbe hijackers were Muslims. The Iranian embassy takeover was by Muslims. The Beirut U.S. Embassy bombers were Muslims. The Libyan U.S. Embassy attack was by Muslims. The Buenos Aires suicide bombers were Muslims. The Israeli Olympic team attackers were Muslims. The Kenyan U.S. Embassy bombers were Muslims. The Saudi Khobar Towers bombers were Muslims. The Beirut Marine Barracks bombers were Muslims. The Beshan Russian school attackers were Muslims. The First World Trade Center bombers were Muslims. The Bombay Mumbai India attackers were Muslims. The Achille Lauro cruise ship hijackers were Muslims. The Nairobi, Kenya shopping mall killers were Muslims. The September 11th, 2001 airline hijackers were Muslims. The Sydney only a rare problem. Atheists living with Pakistani school children killers were Muslims.
Wow, isn't that incredible? We're going to take a short break. We'll keep going with this really exposing. We just got a comment, too. This viral video that's going out with what we're playing now is that it's really been going on 1,400 years since Muhammad slithered upon the earth and this Islam thing. It's definitely a cult. There's no question about it. But can you believe that, this expose? Wow.
I sure can. It brings it into excellent focus. What the hell is the reason to this day that the President of the United States and his administration chokes up on the word Islamic terrorist? Everybody knows they're not tall Swedish nuns, don't they?
Right.
So certainly it's beyond soft on Islam. In fairness, as has the past 4 presidents of the United States, they've all talked about tolerant, moderate, peaceful. Well, the hell they are. Look at the tinderbox now throughout the Middle East. There are thousands of Muslim terrorist incidents per month now. They're all over the world. There's some we hear about and others we don't hear about. So we've gotten accustomed to that now. After this stunning expose by this guy, which I'm really enjoying. He's telling it like it is, isn't he?
Right. Yeah, there's no question about this. And with what ISIS do and the brutality, and we're seeing stuff that has been going on 1,400 years. Now, the only difference is now we have TV, and they're using a lot of social media, those 90,000 tweets. I'm just wondering, though, at some point, is all this just going to really backfire on them with this whole caliphate thing? Because it's just infuriating all the other people on the other spectrum, because they represent 1.6 billion, and they're all into this caliphate and this horrific Sharia law, which treats women have to wear these garbage bags over their head. So, do you think that this horribleness that ISIS is doing, they've been killing off all the Christians in the Middle East. They're quickly disappearing even as we speak. Do you think their horrific things they're going to do is going to backfire on them?
I wish it would, but I don't think so. The last caliphate, which means world domination, it simply means taking over the world, was in 1925, the Ottoman Empire, where they got together and killed 1.5 million Armenians. It's, though not covered well by the news, look at what's going on today throughout the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, elsewhere in the world. This started really with the Arab Spring. Obama couldn't wait to upset all of these leaders, and he hoped to install the Brotherhood. Well, it sure worked, except thankfully for Egypt. Egypt had enough of Morsi's Sharia law about 2 days after he was in office in Egypt, and fortunately kicked them out. Obama's been really unhappy ever since that happened. A few weeks ago, he was talking about our wonderful ally in Yemen, and you see what's happened there now. Yemen was another word for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, which should have read Al-Qaeda in Yemen. They are the exporters. They did the French incident, a recent Australian incident. So the Houthi, or however the hell you pronounce it, sounds like a strip club anyway. They've now virtually taken over Yemen. They're running the port of Aden. They've taken over a large refinery there. It's gone the way of Libya and others. It's just, ISIS is an outgrowth of all that activity from Al-Qaeda. It's really Al-Qaeda under another name, only the problem now is it's a state. They're taking over a country now. It's not a little terrorist thing, but it's the Islamic State of Syria and Iraq. That's a hell of a state. They're now in control of Ramadi and the busy Anwar province that we lost all the brave American men and some women there to take the damn thing. They've taken it back now. Their next stop is Mosul, second largest city in Iraq. And They're well on the way to Baghdad from the south. So with their sophistication, Muslims must support a caliphate, period. All Muslims, 1/4 of the world, are sworn in our terminology to support a military caliphate. I don't know how they make the distinction of military from another caliphate, but it goes back to Muhammad in the 7th century. So ISIS is becoming stronger every day because it's clearly a military caliphate. They're being joined from all over the world, including Indonesia, the country with the largest Muslim population. They're growing by the hour, really. We're doing very little. We do a couple bombing missions. We kill a camel here and there, and we knock out an unoccupied building. So I don't know where the hell it's going, but it's not good, and we're not doing anything about it. The administration is talking about a phantom, imaginary coalition. Actually, there isn't any coalition to speak of. Saudi Arabia is at risk now, out of Fatoussi or whatever the hell it is in Yemen. They can go west at the bottom of the Gulf and take over Saudi, and we are really in it. And it's, of course, supported by Iran. All of Al-Qaeda has always been funded in a safe harbor for Al-Qaeda terrorists. They're supporting this now in Yemen and elsewhere, and we're pretending to negotiate with them. What is your backpack spontaneous observation about this farce we call negotiating with Iran?
Well, at one point, this Ayatollah Khomeini, who really is the leader of Iran, even though they say they have a president, he really is the backbone. He's really calling the shots. That guy's just a puppet, whoever their president is. But they're shouting death to America while John Kerry, another Secretary of State, is in Switzerland meeting with all these people, wasting taxpayers' money. I mean, taxpayers are having to support this expensive meeting, and they're trying to negotiate while they're chanting death to America. That's just how in the world could they keep going with these talks?
What do you hear in your circle of what's motivating Obama to be pretending to negotiate this thing? What do you think?
Those are all great questions. We have insider information that Obama did spend 10 years in a Muslim ashram in Indonesia, and there's still speculation going around. I was just researching this. He really isn't a U.S. citizen from a lot of they recently published his passport. You can find it on whitehouse.gov, and I was researching this, and they're saying when you look at it on Adobe Photoshop, when you can pull it up, you can see it's all got layers. So people have, looks like it's completely fake. You can download it, anybody can, and put it up in Adobe Photoshop. There's numerous videos on this on YouTube. You can check it out. So they're really saying that, number one, he never was a U.S. citizen, and he spent 10 years living in a Muslim ashram, and his dad was a Kenyan Muslim. His mother was an atheist/communist. So, I mean, that's really the answer to your question.
Oh, hell, he's not been one room away from a communist since he was born. You know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I keep hearing that he's failed utterly with the ridiculous Obamacare, that joke.
Right.
So some of the pundits are speculating he wants this for his legacy, but I see something more than that. This simply isn't going to work, and everybody knows it, this so-called negotiation. I don't know what's in his mind, but I don't like it at all. What else did your man say? And he's proven that the atrocities, the attacks, are, of course, Muslim.
Right. We're going to keep playing IQ Razuli.
Think of it. Hindus living with Jews, no problem. Baha'is living with Jews, no problem. Jews living with atheists, no problem. Sikhs living with Hindus, no problem. Hindus living with Baha'is, no problem. Christians living with Jews, no problem. Jews living with Buddhists, no problem. Shintos living with atheists, no problem. Buddhists living with Sikhs, No problem. Baha'is living with Christians? No problem. Buddhists living with Shintos? No problem. Buddhists living with Hindus? No problem. Hindus living with Christians? Only a rare problem. Atheists living with Buddhists? No problem. Confucians living with Hindus? No problem. Atheists living with Confucians? No problem. Muslims living with Jews? Problem. Muslims living with Sikhs? Problem. Muslims living with Hindus? Problem. Muslims living with Baha'is? Problem. Muslims living with Shintos? Problem. Muslims living with Buddhists? Problem. Muslims living with Christians? Problem. Muslims living with Muslims? Very big problem. So this led to, they're not happy in Gaza. They're not happy in Egypt. They're not happy in Libya. They're not happy in Iran. They're not happy in Iraq. They're not happy in Yemen. They're not happy in Pakistan. They're not happy in Syria. They're not happy in Lebanon. They're not happy in Nigeria. They're not happy in Kenya. They're not happy in Sudan. They're not happy in Morocco. And they're not happy in Afghanistan. So where are they happy? They're happy in Australia. They're happy in Belgium. They're happy in France. They're happy in Holland. They're happy in Italy. They're happy in Germany. They're happy in Spain. They're happy in Sweden. They're happy in Denmark. They're happy in the USA and Canada. They're happy in Norway and India. They're very happy in England. Loads of welfare benefits. They're happy in almost every country that is not Islamic. And who do they blame? Not Islam. Not their leadership. Not themselves. They blame the countries they are happy in. And they want to change the countries they're happy in to be like the countries they came from where they were unhappy. Islamic Jihad, an Islamic terror organization. ISIS, an Islamic terror organization. Al-Qaeda, an Islamic terror organization. Taliban, an Islamic terror organization. Boko Haram, an Islamic terror organization. Al-Nusra, an Islamic terror organization. Abu Sayyaf, an Islamic terror organization. Al-Badr, an Islamic terror organization. Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamic terror organization. Lashkar-e-Taiba, an Islamic terror organization. Ansaru, an Islamic terror organization. Jama'ah Islamiyah, an Islamic terror organization. Abdullah Azam Brigades, an Islamic terror organization. Al-Shabaab Somalia, an Islamic terror organization. And this is just scratching the surface on Islamic terrorism. There are more, lots more. Please forward a link to this video to help spread the word that virtually all terrorism today throughout the world is Islamic, and risk being called a hate monger for telling the truth about Islamic hate mongers. Thank you from author IQ Al-Rasuli.
Wow, can you believe that expose that IQ Rasuli put together? It's really, wow, it's going viral all over the internet.
He tells it like it is, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny it. We call this Islam for Dummies or Muslim Islam for Dummies. I mean, it's like, those dummy books are popular. It's just the 101. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what this Islam-Muslim menace is. The 1.6 billion is about 20% of the world's population, trying to annihilate the other 7 billion or the other 5 billion on the planet. That's just unbelievable.
They live here among us in false pretenses. They have jobs, many of them. They send kids to school, but their social and private life is strictly Islam. They practice Sharia law at home where no one can see them. They abuse women at home. They don't let them out without a male family member escort. You've heard recently about the honor killing. The girls going to high school become a little Americanized, and father and brothers cheerfully kill them. They think that's a good way to go. And this is the true Islam that President Obama and his administration obviously favors. You have our session, our show with Azuli, do you not?
Yeah, we have that, and go check out, if you go to blogtalkradio.com/Voices of Global Freedom, you'll be able to find that, and it's very revealing. And there's also a lot of confusion about the whole Mohammed Islam thing. He actually disproves that they are part of the whole Abraham from the Bible, that they actually have no connection whatsoever with the Old or the New Testament. They're completely separate, and he goes under incredible research. He spent something like 30 years proving that. So that's one of the things that the Muslims and Islam is always saying, that they believe in Jesus in some degree and all that stuff. Don't think of that. They're completely separate. They have nothing to do with the Old or the New Testament.
The capital sin in Islam is leaving the faith, which they call apostasy. The penalty for that is death. Remember that guy that did a cartoon out of Holland? They're still running around trying to kill him and find him. And our man here has a fatwa, a kill order against him. There's an exception to that in the Hadith, that's writings of Muhammad. And there are clear exceptions in the Quran that they bring out and pray to 5 times a day. That is, they can pretend not to be Muslim if it furthers the Muslim goal, which is world domination. So there's speculation, people smarter than I am, that that's what Obama's doing. He's allowed to do that under the tenets of the Quran. Pretend not to be a Muslim. Otherwise, their strictest rule is if you leave the faith, they kill you. Well, right. You got his appearance on it?
Yeah, we have it. We have that in archives to go check out. One of the big things with Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Israel, he made a statement recently that the only country in the Middle East where Christians are really welcome and taken care of is in Israel. And we've never had a president such as Obama to be so anti-Israel. Could you ever imagine that we would have Obama be so, any president would be anti-Israel as much as he has?
Furthermore, Backpack, I can understand how the American Jews still support it. There are more Jews here in the United States than there are in Israel. And it puzzles people smarter than I am how the hell they can still support him. They often have mixed loyalty between here and Israel. They send their kids to fight in the Israeli Defense Force. That's why, incidentally, that Israel's not allowed to have an army. Were you, as an American citizen, fight with any foreign army, it's a felony under congressional law. So that's why Israel calls it the Israeli Defense Force. But Jews here readily send their young men and women over to fight with the Israelis, which makes sense. That makes. But how the hell they can still support Obama? They did twice. Just messes with my mind. What about you, Becca?
Well, a lot of the American Jews that you're referring to are big fans of Stalin and communism and freedom, free welfare for everybody and that sort of thing. So you were in a speech fairly recently where you talked about that, and you brought up the Stalin. What did you discuss with that?
Well, I was amazed with that. There was a couple hundred, maybe 250, mostly retired, pretty well-to-do American Jews. And I always take questions after my appearance on the podium. And I take comments from the audience. A guy commented, we're talking about Russia and their takeover of the Ukraine now, and Putin's ideas about Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, recreating the old Soviet Union. Anyway, elderly gentleman, well-spoken, nicely dressed, said, we need Stalin back. I was stunned. And I addressed the crowd and I said, hell, it's on record, Stalin might have undoubtedly, killed more Jews in the Pale, which was the Ukraine, than did Hitler. Oh, no. The audience mood was that Russians need a strong hand. And that was certainly Stalin. Yeah, I guess it was. So, anyway, I can't get my head around that any more than I can. the atrocities of ISIS now. I just can't get there from here.
One of the exclusive interviews we recently had, too, was with Phyllis Schlafly, who is considered one of the top all-time leaders of the conservative movement in the United States of America. She's been honored by Ladies' Home Journal to be among the top 100 all-time women influential. What an incredible honor and privilege it was to speak with her. One of the things that came up through that interview was talking about the feminists and why aren't the feminists coming out more against Sharia law. And, what was some of your takeaway from her comments in that incredible interview that we had with Miss Schlafly?
It was incredible. She is 90 years old and still going strong. She's on air every day and all over. Right? What's her website? Write to Colin.
EagleForum.org. If you can go check out EagleForum.org. What a wonderful organization that they're doing to really bring back and preserve traditional types of values and things that we really need to address in our country, and how far we've gone from the last 40, 50 years. This country is really going in a very scary direction.
I recall you asked her why there's not a peep out of the feminists here about Islam and Sharia law, dressing women in body bags, all the abuse of women. And her response was that they're just lonely, self-centered, I'm coming close to this, and they don't have time, and they hate men, and that's just what they do. They're not worried about it. Is that about what she said?
Yeah, that's pretty much, we're active on social media as well. I've tried to reach out and get a conversation going with other feminists through social media, such as Gloria Steinem, try to connect with her, and there's just no comment whenever she's been approached. She's considered the ringleader or gang leader, if you want to say, of the feminists, and so she's not, they just don't want to comment on that. They're focused on other things.
Well, worst case, they're going to be going to Burkas R Us stores.
Yeah, that's one of the things, MagnifyView.com and Voice of Global Freedom, we're trying to make sure that we aren't going to Burkas R Us and really try to help all of Americans so that we do get back on track and get in the right direction. We're seeing some very serious types of things. We can also talk about, we've had about, 10 threats right now. We can cover some of those. We've already discussed the 500,000 Syrians that, and 10% we're looking at as terrorists, so about 50,000. What are some of the other threats that we're seeing?
Interesting. A Pew, that's a real reputable survey, think tank among others, indicates that 70% of Americans believe there's an imminent ISIS attack on America coming, or Al-Qaeda. As you know, our insiders, we work with them for years. Some are still with government agencies, others are recently retired. They are concerned, as they never have been before, about an imminent 2-3 month attack on America by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Number one in the threat is, who's counting, maybe 1,000 Americans with passports. Most of them are naturalized. They really weren't born here. They're raised in their mosque-centric Sharia law thing at home, and they're born loyal to Islam as opposed to the United States or anyone else. A lot of them have been making their way to Syria to fight with ISIS against us and against Christians. They're desensitized there. By that I mean I'll avoid the graphics of the atrocities against humanity that they learn to perform and enjoy there. They learn weapons, they learn explosives, they learn tactics, small unit tactics. They're really hardened over a couple years. One was just rolled up in Ohio. He had cleverly, a couple years ago, bought a ticket from Ohio, I don't know where, to Istanbul and then to Greece. That was a pretty smart move. He never went on to Greece. He went and fought with ISIS for a couple years. They've just arrested him now. Yay, good guys, girls in the FBI. They rolled him up coming back for aid and abetting an enemy and planning now to kill police and the military. So the first big threat that the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and my hat's off to those brave men and women that make up the task force. It's made up of FBI and other counter-terrorist agencies. So they've arrested him, and that's a classic we're afraid of, that they're coming back now. They're one flight away out of Amsterdam or any other European point of departure to landing in an American port of entry. They don't need visas. They're on American passports. They're on Canadian and Australian passports. They're on Western European ones that don't require a visa. So that's a real threat now that they're coming back. Our sources, our high echelon sources, don't think they're coming back here to work in McDonald's or Walmart. So that's a big threat. A second threat is we're training Muslims as, hats off to you, Backpack, for breaking that story. Story appears now under the masthead in the magnified view of terrorist training camps in America, Backpack. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, go check out www.terrorcamps.com. It's a consortium between MagnifiedView.com, TopTalkRadio.com, Strategic Alliance, and it's a lot of different feeds of the terror camps across America. Muslims of America has been known to house the Beltway sniper incident that happened years ago, and it was a street copper that brought that guy to justice, or those people that were shooting people from the freeway. There have been using dummies to do small arms fire training, and they've been blowing up buses, school buses, inside these compounds where you're not welcome. If you show up, you'll see people with AR-15 rifles, and we've already seen Pamela Geller was there in Christian Action Network. We've been reporting with that, where they were live on the scene in Islamburg, which is their corporate headquarters in New York City, and they've got franchises now, if you want to use that word, throughout the United States, from sea to shining sea. When they showed up, they were promptly told to leave, and they even hit their car as they were driving off. And Christian Action Network and Pamela Geller has really done a lot to expose that. This is just in our backyard. So we also have a friend of ours we talked to fairly recently. She didn't do her research. She moved to Dearborn, Michigan. Maybe this is also advice to go check out your neighborhood before you go really thoroughly. But lo and behold, she's 3 miles away from one of the largest Muslim areas in the entire United States. It's 45% Somali immigrants. And lo and behold, next thing she knows, she hears the call of worship just a few miles from her home, and she's desperate to get out of that situation. But that's a really a big breaking story. What are your thoughts about that whole? You show up to Dearborn, Michigan, in the heartland of the United States, and next thing you know, you're surrounded by Muslims and mosques and Sharia law.
They're doing what in Europe, London, Paris, elsewhere, they're calling no-go zones. The Muslims have taken over. They're practicing Sharia law. Women can't be outside without a member of their household. They have to be dressed in their garbage bags and like that. Firemen and coppers don't even enter those areas. So that's occurring now in Dearborn and Minneapolis and Dallas suburbs. The idiots in Irving, Texas, have just accepted Sharia law to some degree in that town. Can you believe that, Backpack?
Yeah, that's unheard of, and there has been some states that have stepped forward, and North Carolina recently has banned Sharia law. I've been talking to Governor Greg Abbott, who's just recently elected, and to try to make sure and more states pick up that and really ban it, because this is the Constitution. That's our law. I don't see how we can have any other law than the Constitution of the United States.
There's no distinction most legal systems, ours, Napoleonic law, others, make a fine distinction between civil and criminal law. As Islam is directed by the Quran, there's no distinction. So Irving went for that. They think it's civil law, where in actuality it's both. Another commitment to this big basket of threats is Obama is bringing in on a false pseudo-asylum 500,000 Syrians, hundreds of thousands Somalians. Hell, that hadn't been a country for 25 years. That's the country where being a pirate is a rational occupation, you know. He's bringing mobs of them in, many young men, 18 to 30. FBI estimates that a minimum 10% of these are flat-out seasoned trained terrorists. They're in Minneapolis now, as they are in Dearborn. Maybe they'll get a little boat and start knocking pirating ships in Lake Superior, do you think? Anyway, that was funny.
Yeah, one of the things Yoda and I have had extensive discussions on, there's many countries around the world, I think many Americans aren't really aware of this, is that they really aren't countries. I mean, we can talk about Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, you know, and really Iraq, Afghanistan. They really aren't countries. They're just a bunch of tribal leaders, and they've been like that for thousands of years. And, you know, the United Nations, I'm not a fan of them at all, but they try to make them out to be nations, and they really aren't. It's just a bunch of tribes fighting, and they've just always been fighting with each other. So I think that's actually a really important point to raise, is that people try to make these places into countries, but they're not. It's just all tribes running around fighting with each other.
Yeah, they are, and we're into nation building and turning these hellholes into democracies. That's strictly forbidden by the Hadith and Quran. They can't have a democracy. It's a theocracy. Director of the FBI recently came out saying that there are active open cases against terrorists in all 50 states. He said that openly on television. What he didn't say is that many of these are centered on the mosques in those states. That's obviously hard to penetrate. It's hard to surveil. It's hard to get information out of. All of the 9/11 bombers were operating out of mosques in New Jersey, here in lovely San Diego. So they have open cases now that they admit to in each and every one of our 50 states. This is adding up nicely, isn't it?
Wow.
The threat.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And we have to do some takeaways. You know, if someone goes to a flight school and only wants to learn how to take off and not land, let's hope that they've corrected that. Don't you want to hope that?
Yeah, thank you. I was the world's most mediocre pilot, weak guy, but I sure wanted to land. Sometimes I landed 40 feet up in the air to the instructors. Obama has joined the United Nations in a program to bring more Muslims in under pseudo-phony asylum. Interesting, they're filtering out Christians. In the so-called refugees they're bringing out of Somalia and North Africa, while they're allowing Muslims in. They provide them with everything. They're sprinkling them around cities, some small places like Cheyenne, Wyoming. Can you imagine a bunch of Muslims showing up in Cheyenne?
Well, it is amazing, and one of the breaking news stories that just happened in the last week was in Libya is only about 300 miles to the coast of Italy, the country, and there was a bunch of Muslims on this raft, and they pinpointed the Christians and they killed them. They just threw them overboard, the Muslims. I think they killed at least 12 Christians that were on this raft. And can you believe that? That Libya, it's like the difference between Florida and Cuba. That's really close.
Yeah.
Key West is only a few hundred miles. So really, Italy should be really doing everything to see the threat of all these Libyans taking over a lot, especially ISIS now has really heavy presence in Libya. You know, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's what they do. They are sworn by our vernacular to convert or kill Christians. That's just what they do. So another source of problem for us now, an imminent threat here in our homeland, is black Muslims that have joined the training camps that you explained earlier. They were actually founded in a prison up the road here in Chino, California. The reason they converted to their version of Islam, they get more privileges in prisons. Many of them now are joining the Islamic terrorist training camps, the story you broke. Another problem we're confronted with, pointing to an imminent threat here, is however well-meaning charities. Churches of all faiths around the country can't help themselves bringing these terrorists in and taking care of them. It has to do with God's mysterious ways, I guess, and all that business. So that's a part of the threat, is charities and churches are helping bring them in, providing them with safe harbor. There are hundreds of thousands of students here on student visas, many particularly from Muslim countries. Incidentally, there's about 200 countries in the world, and 50 of them are Muslim-dominated and flat rule.
Wow, that's incredible.
People don't know this. So many of them here on a student visa paid for. They get housing, some get cars, cell phones, medical treatment, education, money in their pockets. Many set one foot in the college or university and they come back 4 years later. They're never seen again by the university.
Wow. Well, where did the time go? We've got about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. It's exclusive. Also, check out Michael Connolly, our last show, where he's actually suing Obama for treason. We're going to play another one of our great guests, the National Anthem girl, and she's been a wonderful person. We're helping her as much as we can.
Go back.
We're going to play part of her highlight reel here, and we met her recently met up with her and really got to know her, and she's really doing some great things. Sing along with the Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Wow, what an incredible show. We also want to point out kntrtalk.com, Roger Galloway. He's had us on once a month. He's been a wonderful person to work with, Roger Galloway at KNTR, Voice of the Free. Thank you all for our show. We thank you to the listeners, and it's been a wonderful show. As we sign off, have a great night and be safe.
Great job, Backpack. Great job in Vegas at the National Association of Broadcasters.
Thank you.
Well done, Backpack.